I'm Angela Stent. I'm director of the Center for Eurasian, Russian, and East European Studies. And on behalf of my colleagues in the Edmund A. Walsh School of Foreign Service, the School of Continuing Studies, and the McDonough School of Business, I would like to welcome you all here to the speech by Dr. Alexey Valentinovich Ulyukaev, who's the Minister of Economic Development of the Russian Federation. And before I start, I would also like to congratulate Russia on the successful completion of the Olympic Games. It was a great success, both in terms of the venue and, of course, the number of medals that Russians won. So anyway, it was a great accomplishment. And now I would like to introduce the minister. Alexey Ulyukaev received his doctoral degree from the economics department of the Lomonosov Moscow State University. In 1991, he began working for the Russian government as an official advisor on economic affairs. By 1998, he was deputy director of the Institute for Economy Issues during the transition period. From 2000 to 2004, he served as the first deputy of the Minister of Finance of the Russian Federation. And from 2004 to 2013, he was the first deputy chairman of the Central Bank of the Russian Federation. Minister Ulyukaev has served as the Minister of Economic Development since June 2013. I know that he is here this week to discuss with U.S. officials increasing and expanding U.S. economic relations with Russia, trade, investment, and we're really delighted to welcome you here, so please join me in welcoming Minister Ulyukaev.
Thank you very much for this possibility. Good afternoon, dear friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor for me to speak here. Some introductory remarks. First, really here for 3 very busy days. We'll have a working group with my colleague, Secretary of Commerce. I'll have a meeting with trade representative of the United States, and we have a lot of business contacts today. I have a meeting in Chamber of Commerce, and then in OPIC, and then we'll have in World Bank, in different financial institutions, and different business societies. But I all the time trying to speak with the youngers. The future is yours. So it's very important that you will understand me and I will understand you. Then thank you very much for your polite words about Olympic Games. And we have a lot, I don't know exactly, 12 gold medals, but partly it was delivered by this American guy who successfully married our girl. It's a good example how we can cooperate. And then, well, I think I will speak about half an hour, if you will not mind, and then we will just have Q&As and any kind of interactive talks. Where shall I start? Once upon a time, then I was younger, and the President Yeltsin, first President of the Russian Federation, had a meeting with the foreign journalists, and they asked him, please, briefly, in one word, explain us what is all about Russian economy. And he said, good. They said, okay, but a little bit larger. In 2 words. And he said, not good. and that is all the time. You are between good and not good. You have challenge, and you have to face the challenges. Unfortunately, last year, we were closer to second option, to not good. I mean, in GDP terms, it was 1.3% growth. Of course, it's growth. It's not stagnation. It's not recession. It's not stagflation. But 1.3 is absolutely not enough for emerging markets. I'm afraid this year the American economy will have higher rates. America, developed economy. And we have somehow to cover gap, but not to lose it. Why is it? For me, three main reasons. First, the recovery kind of growth is over. By the mid of 2012, we passed by the point of highest previous dynamic. Recovery mode of growth is all the time is easier. The only thing you need is demand. If you have domestic or global demand, and in recovery path, you have labor force, you have productive force, you have everything. But when recovery is over, you have no maneuver resources. We have quite a small unemployment, 5.6% of population. By any standards, it's very small. It's a good news that there's small unemployment, but bad news that there's no room for increasing of employment. The same with productive forces. The level of usage of productive forces is about 65, 66%. We still have some room, but very small room for increase. So it means that it's not just only point of demand for the production, some other position. But demand is important because the global demand was in shortage in previous years. So for instance, Russian-American trade, it's not very big anyway, but it was highest point in 2011, 2012 and 2013. It was some small slowdown tendency. And the same with the other, our trade partners, including, first of all, the main trade partners, the European community. Fortunately, from third quarter of last year, the conditions of world trade began to getting better, and both physical and value amount of our trade began to increase. But it couldn't be the big driver for economy as it used to be in early, beginning of the century. The main driver was the consumer demand. The real income of the population was growing about 4% last year and previous year. A good result, 4% is quite good, and the retail trade was also supported by the consumer credit increase. Last year it was about 28% of increase of consumer credits. But the incomes, means wages and salaries, mostly, this is the, from the viewpoint of production, this is costs. And if the increase of the incomes is higher than increase of labor productivity, it creates the greater cost of the production. And the third driver is investment, and that is the problem on which we are mostly concentrated. Because last year we have a zero growth investment. Nothing unusual for global economy beginning from 2008, but something unusual for our economy. And the interesting thing, if we look on the structure of investment, I mean direct investment in the capital, the companies, in the funds, productive funds, we will see that it was mostly because of decrease of government investment or government state-owned companies investment, including, first of all, Gazprom, our national champion, which decreased by 30% of their investments. The same with the government. Private investments was increasing, not very rapidly, but something around 7.5% of growth, not bad. And direct foreign investments increased even higher. So it means that for some reasons, global investor estimate risk for Russian economy lower than domestic investors. that's some reasons for rethinking of that problem, for changing all the situation. So, two points after that. First, the new mode of growth should be investment kind of growth. And in that, we are very in parallel with Brazil, for instance. Brazil and Russia have to move from consumer-oriented to the investment-oriented growth. And for example, China have to move vice versa, from investment-oriented to consumer-oriented, because any country has its own limits to growth. And the second point is the result will be dependent mostly not on the demand side, not from the fiscal stimulus or monetary stimulus, but from the supply side. We have limits to growth on the supply side, on infrastructural limitations. First of all, transport limitations, I mean roads, railroads, pipes, ports, airports, and others. This logistic that sometimes create a great cost for production, transaction costs. And energy infrastructure also. So our task is to create a more friendly climate, more friendly environment for businesses to attract it. Because when I talk with the global investors, they said, look, we have a lot of opportunities. With our money, we can have to China, to Korea, to Indonesia, to India, to Brazil. You have to win the competition. You haven't think that all money in the world have the dream to come to Russia. It's no dream, it's a competition. So we have to compete, and there are two parameters of competition: return to capital and risk estimation. And it's easy to get a high return to capital than your economy increase 6–7% a year, like we had in the beginning of the century. So now we cannot do it like that. So we cannot guarantee 30% of return to capital. It means that we have to compensate it by lower risks. Lower risk means property right protection, investment protection, the low barriers to access to the market, to access to the resources and others. So that is why the implemented so-called roadmaps of national entrepreneurial initiative. Entrepreneurials means this is a business society who formulate the parameters of that. And we, as a Minister of Economic Development, only assisted them to organize, to structurize the idea. We had 11 roadmaps like that. Tax administration, to simplify the procedures of tax paying and tax regulation. Custom duty administration. The point is that it takes much longer time to go through the custom duty with the goods in Russian Federation than, say, in America or in Europe. It takes them more time and more money for that. Then access to the land, to the electricity supply, gas supply, transportation. And for all that parameters, and then registration of businesses and others. And for all these parameters, we have the targets, and we have the KPI for authorities. We have to get the targets. If not, the KPI will not be fulfilled, and will be some problems for authorities. And that is business who monitor it and estimate, is it really in accordance with the roadmap or not? And by the global estimation, we have some results. For instance, doing business ranking of World Bank give us 20-point better position last year than before. 20 positions better is good, but now the position is 92. Not good. But anyway, there is another challenge, because we have to move very fast on these roads, simplifying these conditions for business. The next to it, the role of the government, the privatization. We have the privatization plan. We have some success in last couple of years in banking sector, privatizing the big pieces of shares of biggest our banks, Sberbank and VTB, and our great diamond monopoly, Rosa, and some other companies. Unfortunately, last several years was not quite successful from the market viewpoint for privatization, because the assets were not estimated fairly. And that is why private companies also were not in a position to get IPO or SPO for their capital. I think now the situation is getting better, and there's again risk appetite of the businesses, of the investors. So we look forward to start with the privatization of the biggest railroad monopoly, Russian railroad company. First 5% will be privatized. Then another package of VTB Bank. Then our cargo operator, Sovcomflot. And then very important is the biggest our oil company, Rosneft, the 19.5% of the company, and that is public companies in the stock exchange, would be sought to be privatized in accordance with the plan. And plus some more mid-size enterprises, mid-size companies. But the privatization means change of the type of ownership. It's not enough. The important thing that the companies which are staying in state ownership operate with the same principle as other private companies. So that's why we introduced the corporate management code for them. We introduced the institution of independent directors for that companies and others. Then, of course, the great room for development is SMEs. And we're still not in good shape in that sphere. Only 19% of our GDP is produced by SMEs, 25% of employment, and 5% of the capital of the productive forces there. So we are trying to do several things together. First, give the access to the government demand. Government spent around 8 trillion rubles, how many? More than $200 billion, $250 billion as a government demand for the paying from budget. This year we implemented new law about federal contract system, and by that law, at least 15% of this demand could be spent for SMEs, produce goods and services. It means that it creates better condition for to give loans from the banks to there, because from the viewpoint of bank, it's quite difficult to have a deal with the SMEs because there is no collateral, there is no great story of them. But if they have a contract with the state authority and we have guaranteed cash flow from that, from the budget, it becomes much easier for them to give a credit with that collateral. Plus, we create a system of regional guarantee funds to guarantee regional and federal guarantee funds, which will provide the credit guarantees for banks for them to estimate risks for loans to SMEs as not so high. And we just discussed with our colleagues in OPIC and other American authorities the possible cooperation with that organization in providing the cheaper financial resources for that. When we ask the investors about what, for their mind, what's the main obstacles for investing in Russian regions, for instance, let's say financial resources, administrative barriers, and labor force, qualified labor force. And so we have to provide all three possibilities to them. Then we have to regulate appropriate the financial markets. So that's why we introduced the so-called the mega regulator of financial market. Now the Central Bank of Russian Federation is not only the monetary agency as before, but it's regulated supervisor of banks and all other parts of financial industry, including pension funds, including insurance, and brokers and dealers on the market. We believe it will create better standards of transparency, of understanding, of confidence, because in that sphere, confidence is number 1 point. We do organize some specific institutions like Russian Direct Investment Fund, which have to divide the risks with the global investors to make it easier for them to access to make a decision about investment in the market. And it's mostly concentrated on the infrastructural projects, plus we began to spend money from the National Welfare Fund for that biggest projects. First of all, railroad in Siberia, Transsib and BAM, and we just discussed that point with American businesses also, because some of them is interested in modernization of the roads, concerning both roads itself, but also the locomotive and the cars for that reason. And plus car roads for the automobile roads also, and airport system. To make easier decision for investors, we use the tools of PPP, public-private partnership, and change in legislation. We had and have the concession law, but before it had very narrow field, only roads, automobile roads and bridges, not more. Now we enlarge it, all the public infrastructure, including communal services, heating, water supply, electricity, and also healthcare, education, and other things could be the sphere of concession agreement between the investment and the municipal and regional authorities, and both sides could keep obligation, and if for some reasons authorities will change the rules in terms of taxation and others, they have to keep obligation financially to pay for it. It helps the investors to have appropriate business plan, understandable cash flow. And if you have the cash flow from the authorities, it doesn't depend on the very much on the global demand, on the recession, on the business cycle, and other things, because it's more or less fixed. And of course, we think about global participation. We are trying to think globally and doing business globally. This year is your Russian presidency on G8. Last year it was for G20. And the main point of the agenda of G8 is sustainable growth in secure world. Unfortunately, our world is not secure, and our economic growth is not sustainable. And that is a challenge for all of us, developed countries and developing countries, emerging markets, all of us. Because otherwise, if countries will seek the way to solve this problem on the protectionist way, it will be a game with not zero result, but with the negative result. Everybody will lose from it. So for my mind, all the things like capital flow restrictions and currency wars and others is not appropriate for that reason. We have to think globally and have to find a collective solution. We have a good examples of that collective solution in the how would they call it? Financial Stability Board. The financial regulators all over the world gather and discuss and make the decision. Which national regulators after that must to reduplicate for their national jurisdictions, and it creates good results. And I think that's one of the reasons why we passed by the crisis situation. Now the global economy is getting better, including American, European, and other regional economies. The other point is WTO. We spent 18 long years to join it, and now we're trying to somehow to both use it and to make our intervention for more successful growth. Unfortunately, last 11 years, the global society, WTO members, couldn't get success on Doha round negotiations, how to liberalize world trade. And one other good example of good cooperation, the Bali Ministerial Conference of 160 member countries of WTO, shows that we can solve the problems. And we work very hard together with my friend, trade representative of the United States, Michael Froman, with the representatives of the other countries, and of course the general manager of the organization, Roberto Azevedo, day and night. And we found the results, and the trade facilitation agreement was adopted and created a new way, new life for the Doha round. Now we hope that it will be successfully finalized. Of course, all the time we have the problems on the conditions. Our partners in the United States and European community say, look guys, you are doing against the WTO rules. Sometimes we agree, sometimes not. If we agree, we change our position. If not, we continue discussion. The same with us. But it's normal to have problems, normal to solve the problems. That is not normal is stop discussing, stop talking. That is not normal. And the OECD, Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, we applied for accession to OECD, and we think that our target is passed by all the 22 committees, technical and juridical committees of the organization this year, from the expert side, from the technical side, to be prepared, and then to have the political decision in not later than 2015. And once again, we successfully cooperate with the American partners. Just recently I have a meeting in Paris with the ambassadors of G8 members in OECD, and all of them was very cooperative, and we were trying to solve the problems and find the way to get the good results. that is my understanding of situation where we are now globally and where we are now nationally, domestically as Russian Federation, and what perspectives we have. Very briefly, I think that this year we have a little bit better performance. We have something 2.something% in GDP, 2.something in industrial output. I very much hope that investment curve will be better, and our estimation is it could be closer to 4% of increase of general investment to the capital. We believe that inflation will be more or less under control, so I mean that the final result will be better than in 2013. Then we got 6.5% in CPI index. And this year, our target is to have it not more than 5% of CPI. One final remark. When we discuss the investment situation with the investors, some of them say, look, you have better fundamentals than some of your neighbors and competitors because you have very small sovereign debt, 11% of GDP. You have quite strong fiscal construction and good monetary policy. But your image, investment image, much worse than your fundamentals. And that gap do not allow transform savings into investments. And that is the main point for the economic policy, to transform savings into investments. The rate of savings in Russian economy is about 30%. It's very good. Of course, it's not like China. Chinese have 50%. But they have no healthcare, security, and other things. But in comparison with developed economy, we have higher saving rates. But investment rates only 20% of GDP. So this gap, 30 minus 20, 10% of GDP, that is our room for attracting investments and having better growth. If we will be successful in solving the problem I mentioned, on the way I mentioned, I believe we will get this gap and transform it into investments. If not, the other minister will explain you the situation in Russian economy. Thank you very much.
Time for questions. We have microphones standing here, so if you would like to ask the minister a question, please go to the microphone, and I will start off with the first question. We have a number of young people here who are studying, who would be very interested in doing business in Russia. What would you recommend to them? What sectors would be good? Where should they start?
To explore and to invest.
Both.
To make money or to analyze?
All right, make money, okay.
Right. Make money. I would say agriculture, food industry could be a quite successful investment in the future. We believe that Russia will become a great exporter of agricultural products. So we very much hope on the success of Doha round, because some developed countries, first of all, our European colleagues, they subsidize agriculture too much. In accordance with the Doha round, the trade facilitation agreement, the subsidies could be cut. If we were successful, our agrarian export will have a great impulse. And so we could export, say, around 40 billion metric tons of grain yearly. And and different kind of food industry will be successful also. And then innovative industries, of course. Well, if you mean not the making money, but making knowledge, understanding. Mm-hmm. So I would say that natural monopolies is quite an interesting point of exploring railroads, gas, electricity, how to make it more efficient. It's very interesting.
Okay, and we'll start here if you can just identify yourself.
Minister Ulyukaev, thank you very much for your presentation. My name is Katerina Kulagina, and I work here at Georgetown University trying to bridge gaps of understanding between Russia and the United States. Мы рады приветствовать вас в университете. Спасибо большое за вашу презентацию. One of the items that you mentioned as barriers to entry for foreign investors to Russia is the qualified force, labor force. From our part, Georgetown has been involved with the Russian government in training cadre for чиновники, etc. We successfully completed an SME project in October 2012, bringing cadre to Georgetown to learn from their counterparts. We also just finished a program for real estate professionals and urban planners who came to Georgetown. From your perspective, institutions of higher education, Georgetown's and others, how can we better assist you in your work? What are the type of industries, what are the type of know-how skills you feel are important in bridging the 10% investment gap, if you will, that would eventually help to bridge that gap? What can we do? What areas can we focus on to help you with your work to bring the labor force know-how up? Thank you. Спасибо.
Thank you very much for your question, for your cooperation. You know, all the time then I speak before audience in America or Great Britain and others. I think that good part of audience do not need my explanation. They speak Russian, understand Russian economy and so on and so forth. But anyway, of course, the educated labor force is quite important. We used to have a great preference before other countries. But we're spending it and do not invest enough for re-education, re-qualification of the people. And sometimes it should be changed, and now it's time to change. For instance, this year we created special programs to subsidize companies which will attract qualified personnel. If they need, for instance, to educate, say, 1,000 staff people and have to pay, say, I don't know, 200, 300 million rubles for it, we will subsidize them and keep 50% of their spending for that purpose. And cooperation with the foreign institutions, with universities, is very important. And we are going to send the staff to universities and organize other kind of education. We think about, you know, this dual education, both general and professional. And we need very much good, you know, labor professions. Not the lawyers or economists. We have too much lawyers and economists. But good engineers, good technicals, good medical workers, and plus a good staff for the ministries, good administrative staff. It will be very important. So any kind of the cooperation will be important, and probably my colleagues will contact the administration, seeking the way how to do it in the most appropriate way. Thank you very much.
Спасибо. We'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you, Minister, for your comments this evening. I wanted to ask a question about increasing interest over time in the possibility of a U.S.-Russia bilateral investment treaty, and what you think the prospects are of such an agreement coming together, what some of the key issues you think would be, and how that would fit into your plan for improving investment and development in Russia. Спасибо.
Of course, the investment agreement is very important. During the last 5 years, we are talking with our American friends about that. We sent a letter with our proposals. Our friends explained that it's not acceptable for United States. We got the letter from them and answer that proposal is not acceptable for Russian Federation. And for 5 long years we sent in letters. And it's understandable because we have a lot of agreements with more than 70 countries. And if we change our fundamentals with the American, if we get the American approach on that, it means we have all other 70+ countries can ask us to do the same. And we cannot refuse. And we do understand that American friends feel the same situation. They cannot just easily get our ideas, because it means that they have to change something in their relationships with others. This is a precedent. So we thought that we have to change the agenda. So we proposed, and January we have in January in Davos we had a meeting with the Secretary of Commerce and Trade Representative, and I delivered them our proposals to have it's a new way to have, in accordance with the WTO chapter, it could be some kind of economic integration agreement, and we can put inside all things we want to put. But with that form of agreement, it will not possible for third parties, for other countries, to demand the enlarging the condition of that agreement to the other way. If it will be appropriate, this Wednesday we'll have a working group with the Secretary of Commerce and then the meeting with the trade representatives, and we'll try to discuss it. If it will be appropriate for them, and of course there will be some correction remarks and proposals, but we have to work. We cannot just have, we have pure idea and they have pure idea, and not and no development. We have to work on that, and I believe we can do it. If we'll be successful, then we could do next steps. Next step concerning technical regulation problem, the sanitary control problem, which concerned our colleagues also. But we have to make it step by step and create the general picture of cooperation and trade.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I just wanted to, my name is Vlad, by the way. I am a student here at the McDonough School of Business. I wanted to ask you about the future of the economic and trade relationship between Russia and the former Soviet Union country, Ukraine. How do you think that relationship would change or be affected after the most recent Euromaidan revolution? And could the Ukrainian people still be expecting the rest of the Russian bailout package? Or was it dependent upon the Yanukovych administration staying within the government power? Thank you.
Thank you. You know, then I was going to hear my colleagues said, oh, take care, be careful. Could be provocation about Ukraine. I was very nervous, you know. Well, anyway, it's quite a reasonable question, of course. And I think there's no non-reasonable questions at all. There is non-reasonable answers. Now, Ukraine is a, how to say, tabula rasa, open space. And it's possible to write any kind of letters on this tabula rasa. And we do not know what kind of letters will be written there. Of course, we very much respect the choice of Ukrainian people, our brothers, and we very much will respect the authorities which will be elected by the Ukrainian people, new president and new government. But we have to know who are they and what is their program, what are they going to construct there. Because of course we have and will have some economic interest there, and we have the in industrial and agrarian projects and investment projects, and we will participate with it in any thinkable government. How to say it? Nothing personal, just business. But sometimes it's very much dependent on the person. Then it comes to the just pure financial assistance. In late last year, we agreed about $15 billion package for Ukraine. And we spent $3 billion buying their sovereign debt securities. How much is this $3 billion package of securities now? You know? I do not know. So next package is $2 billion. So we said, now we'll be in standby position. We don't refuse. We keep our obligation, but we'll wait until they organize the government, and government will contact us, explain us what is all about with this money. I think it's quite reasonable. The IMF and the United States, in case, and European society, in case, will behave more or less the same way. Clear position of your clear counterpart, conditions, and why not? Probably we can think about some cooperation and coordination with the United States and the European community about that help to Ukrainian. But now it's non-transparent, unclear situation. First we have to clarify it, and then to talk and to move forward. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay. Minister Ulyukaev, thank you for your informative presentation. My name is Ralph Winnie. I work for the Eurasia Center, and I was fortunate to be able to study international law and Russian language at MGU in the late 90s. Part of my work at the Eurasia Center involves working with delegations from Russia of young entrepreneurs that come over to the US looking to find business partners. They routinely say the Russian government is trying very hard to promote small business in Russia, but they lack the ability to provide the funding for startups and to help with creating of a mentor-mentee program. When I'm working with these delegations here in the US, we try and find them partners, but of course there's the challenge of finding them partners because of the perception among Americans of the challenging business environment in Russia. So what it usually comes down to is we're able to convince the people to be a friend or a mentor for these Russian companies, either an email or a phone call whenever these Russian companies have issues about how to grow their business. My question to you is, how can you work with the US government in trying to find strong business partners for these Russian entrepreneurs so that they can grow and develop their business, not only here, but also working with the expat community within Russia to help them?
Right. What we are going to do, first, to create the chain of information exchange, of logistical assistance, of juridical assistance to the companies which are quite new for that sphere and which is not big enough to attract the special assistance from the outsourcing. Because the mainstream is, if the company invested in Russian economy, it will continue invest and invest. Most investors in Russian economy do not return back the capital. They reinvest capital there because for some reasons they're happy with that investments, right? But new investors, the point is, when we meet investors, it's all the time the same personals and the same companies. We're going to enlarge it. Enlarge, first of all, means mid-size and small-size companies. What we're going to do to create this chain, here in America we have our trade representative office, like in other countries. We're trying to change it into the service center. We do not like them to just send us reports, what's going on. No reports, please. Assist businesses to find the partners, to find their fit in the market, to supply with information, documents, and requirements, to explain it, somehow to provide juridical assistance in some small scales, to organize some meetings, to provide the facilities for these meetings, meeting rooms and something, business missions, whatever. From the other side, in the Russian regions, we're organizing the export support centers, because the mid-size enterprises, they are not exporters, they do not know about the markets. They are possible exporters. Our task is to transform possibility into reality, to explain here, to explain there, and to communicate one with the other. Plus, use the common tools of guarantees, of insurance, of credit support to businesses. And we're trying to do it with cooperation with our friends. With German friends, we organized a mutual fund, KfW, the Institute of Development of Germany, and National Economic Bank organized a mutual fund to support the SMEs in Russian Federation. Now we talk with the American colleagues about the same, and that could help, I believe.
Спасибо большое.
Спасибо вам.
Thank you for taking the time to come speak to us. My name is Nur Sultan. I'm a senior in the School of Foreign Service. And I wanted to get your perspective on Eurasian Economic Union and from your perspective, what are the objectives or what's the future for that possible union? And how do you convince new members to join it? How would you convince the potential new members to see that their future lies in the Eurasian Economic Union? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, we transformed the custom union which exists, consisting of 3 partners, Russia, Kazakhstan, and Belarus. And in accordance with political decision of our leaders, it could be transformed into Eurasian Economic Union by the beginning of 2015. It means for us we have very acute demand to finalize all the preparation of the documents, with the agreement and the documents by the end of April. After that, we'll report to our presidents about that, and it will be just political decision. It means to transform. What is it, custom union? It's free movement of goods. And economic union is free movement of goods, services, labor force, and capitals. And of course, it cannot be, done just overnight. We have some transition periods for different kinds of services and others, because any country have its reasonable national interest, and it have to be protected. Both partners have to win from integration, not to lose. Otherwise it will be fake, it will not be real integration. And we believe that we create, in very acute discussion, by the way, very acute discussion, to create some sustainable construction for that growth. About new members, now there are 2 new members on the table, Armenia and Kyrgyzia, and I think there is a general agreement that will be invited and very soon will be full members of the union. Then no objection. We will wait for some initiative of other countries, and probably the union will be enlarged even more.
Thank you.
My name is Ilya Kendin, and I'm a Georgetown MBA graduate. First of all, thank you very much for coming to Georgetown. It's indeed our pleasure to have you here. Большое спасибо, что вы нашли время приехать к нам после встречи в торгово-промышленной палате во Всемирном банке. Let me ask you 2 questions, if you don't mind.
Во Всемирном банке еще не было, будет потом.
My first question is about Sochi Games. According to the Bloomberg Business Week report, Russia invested $51 billion to host the Olympics. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of this investment for the Russian economic development? How effective do you think this investment will be both in the short and in the long run? And since we are in a business school, what is the expected return on this investment for the country? And my second one is my personal question to you as a leader. Can you please name, let me suggest, 3 biggest challenges that you and your team are facing, and how do you handle them? Thank you.
About Olympic Games. Yes, generally something around $50 billion. It depends on the exchange rate, of course. The result, well, short term, definitely successful, definitely, because it was a great investment projects. With the flight, it created a great demand for different kind of goods and services productions. It was a huge impact to the economic growth. My colleagues estimate is 0.3% of GDP growth a year. If we had last year 1.3, so almost quarter of that was produced by these great investment projects, mega projects, I would say. And so now it's very important to move the facilities to new investment projects, not to lose the investment rate of that. That is the first part. The second part is long-term story. How we utilized it, because now we have a possibility to transform Sochi to multi-seasonable, all-season worldwide resort. But we transform that possibility if only we will have good management. Good management not only from the just company side, but from the projects as a whole. So social infrastructure also, and all the living conditions, environment, security, and others, which is very important for people. And I cannot guarantee that we will be successful in that. We will try a lot. And here we have to find a good balance between the federal interest, local administration, and interest of the companies. And there are some financial problems with the credits and others, and they have to be solved somehow. But anyway, this is a possibility. This is a great possibility. About the challenges, then first president of New Poland, Wałęsa, once said, Polish people have 2 options, fantastic and realistic. Realistic if Martians will come and do all the job, and fantastic if we will do it ourselves. That is the challenge. That is the challenge. To work hard ourselves, not wait for some, changes, which for some reasons will come and make our living better. Working hard, and I understand that it's a very general explanation, but more practical it means that if we will be positioned to cut the administrative barriers, very frankly, our regulative burden is not becoming easier. It's becoming harder for the business. The regulation becoming more and more sophisticated. From the practical side, it means that transaction costs for business is growing. And it's very difficult. It's like, Heracles. What is the English for Hercules?
Hercules.
Hercule, en français. He cut the hydra, like a hydra. He cut one head and it planted 3 heads. The same with barriers, the same with over-regulation. And that is, for my mind, it's the biggest challenge from the practical sphere. We introduced so-called the system of оценка регулирующего воздействия, estimation of regulative influence, something like that. And all the projects of law, or other documents of the government should be passed by this estimation. And this is under my ministry to make sure that it is not created the additional burden for the government. And now we're going to introduce the system one in, one out. If we introduce something which is creating a new, we have to abolish some other position, one in, one out, and probably it will work.
Спасибо.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ulyukaev. I'm Gabriel Balayan, Fulbright visiting scholar at the Library of Congress from Armenia. And my question is concerning the customs union and proposed Eurasian Union. Some experts indicate that there is some inconsistencies with the WTO organization rules and proposed Eurasian Union. So I would like to listen from the first-hand the comments. Do you think those inconsistencies exist in reality, having in mind the fact that Kazakhstan and Belarus are not the members of WTO, and Russia, as you told, have a long history of negotiations? Thank you.
Right. When it comes for Armenia and Kyrgyzstan, it's not a problem because these countries are members of WTO. Then it comes to Belarus, and especially for Kazakhstan, because Kazakhstan now in actual path of accession to the WTO, it's a problem because you have to somehow harmonize requirement for WTO to this concrete country with the requirement for the Russian, which is a member of that. And that creates a big trade-off between these two paths. It's a difficult way. We propose different kinds of how to solve it. Up to now, we are not in a position to guarantee the results. It's really a big discussion. This Wednesday we also touch this point. We have to protect ourselves. Yeah, I could be friendly about that. We very much support the accession of our Kazakh friend, but we have to protect ourselves. And we're not in a position just to start once again from the very beginning procedures of our accession to WTO. We are existing member. We do not we're not going to have a negative impact for our economy from some changes. So it's a process. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minister, for coming and for giving such an informative presentation. My name is Paul Methune, and I'm a graduate student here at the School of Foreign Service. And I had a question regarding some of the reports from the Russian Central Bank last week. As you know, they reported that investment in January was 7% lower than it was year-on-year last year, despite the run-up to the Olympics. And the central bank also revised their growth rates, their projected growth rates for 2014 and 2015 down to below 2%. I was wondering if you could speak about the difference between the growth rate that you suggested and perhaps what the central bank was thinking in light of this data.
Yeah. We have some differences in our approach of the growth, and we are a little bit more optimistic than they are. Our feeling is something between 2 and 2.5, probably 2.2, like that. We will make our new focus in April this year, and it will be 2 and something. They changed their focus. Before they foresee 2.5, now they say it's 1.5, 1.7. Partly it depends on the estimation of the credits or the loans. Probably they know better about the bank loans because they regulate them. and of course there is influence of that performance of the exchange rate. Then the valuation, normally other countries increase the policy rate of the central bank or have some measures to cut down the refinancing to keep the balance of central bank smaller, to have more tight environment for banks to credit. If our monetary authorities will go the same way, it probably will have negative impact to the bank loans, and that will have negative impact to growth. But up to now, we still think that we will have that figures that I mentioned before.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ulyukaev. I'm a business student here in Georgetown. Thank you again for coming to us tonight. Could you please comment on the current dynamical exchange rate? According to business press, National Reserve Fund decided to buy dollars on market instead of buying it from the central bank last week, which probably lowered the currency rate by 5%, something like that. Is there any rationale for weakening national currency?
This is no news. It was decided years before. Then I myself was there in the central bank. And we decided together with the government that it not be just formally appear in the market. Anyway, the government Minister of Finance will operate through the central bank. But central bank will have some kind of Chinese wall between operation in its own interest. They have some rules in which situation it sell, in which it buy, and how much the sum of the intervention could be spent, and so on and so forth. And the point is to separate the influence of that, because this is monetary policy. The buying the currency for national reserve of the government, have nothing to do with the monetary policy. It's absolutely different things. It could be as if government used as one of the market operators. So technically it will be through the central bank, that fundamentally it will be separated from it. That is a very good idea. Very good because it's my idea. Mine means good, right? But I do not think that the time is appropriate. You know, better to make such solutions in more comfortable situation. So it influenced somehow the exchange rate dynamic. Thank you.
Спасибо за вашу презентацию сегодня и ваше время, особенно с вами. My name is Bill Fraser, and I lived in Russia for 3.5 years. I lived there in 92 to 95, very difficult time. And I work here as an investment advisor, helping people make investments. And there is a perception, you touched upon it in your conversation, about problems dealing with investments in Russia. And as you said, you must compete for funds with investments that people might want to put in China or other emerging markets. And that perception is one, and this is a very difficult question to ask. I hesitated even to ask it, but a perception of corruption and danger associated with Russian investments. Recently, you may have seen it or not, there was a presentation on 60 Minutes about an American investor who had some real difficulties with investments he made there, and his lawyer was killed, and he has fled the country. He's unable to go back to Russia. And I personally know of someone else who was a colleague of mine who was killed, involved in Russian investments. And I know it's probably something very difficult to solve, but what is your perception, and what are some of the things that the Russian government can do maybe to improve the perception and the reality of doing business in Russia in a safe and orderly way? The rule of law seems to be one of the key issues that I think people are most concerned about. That would be my question.
Thank you very much. And two points. First, of course, the institutional conditions for investors could be more comfortable. I mean, rule of law, law enforcement, courts, cut is very important, of course, different kind of administration. And investors have to feel that they, the same way as national investors. There is no privileges for this and that. I think we have some success in that way. And you see, once again, the companies which are working, which are already invested, all of them say, yes, you have a lot of problems, but we feel the progress. We see the progress. And it helps us to invest more and more and more. But new players in this game, they do not have their own experience of that. So they have the cases like you said, and for media, this case is quite a good thing to repeat it largely. And you know, it's normal for media. Good news is no news, bad news is really news. And probably sometimes it's our problem. We do not contact enough with the audience, with you colleagues, with the expert, with the journalist, with the members of parliament, with the business societies and others. It's not all the time as comfortable as our today's communication. It's very comfortable for me. Sometimes it's not so comfortable, but it's necessary. It's necessary to explain yourself to the public, and I do think that we are not very successful in that case. But fundamentals first, fundamentals, rule of law, and law enforcement first, of course. Thank you very much.